The magnitude of this game against Penn State seems to just keep getting bigger.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. One of my favorite segments to do on today's show, individual standouts from the 41-7 win against Oregon State, and some more thoughts on Penn State and who has to be good for Oregon to get a win. That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. If you have the chance to go to the Whiteout, boy, you should. You should. It's going to be awesome. I don't fully know what Oregon's uniform is going to be. I suspect it's going to be great because we know what the cleats look like and it's spectacular. But Oregon's schedule coming into this year, I think in the eyes of a lot of people, was Penn State and then just kind of everything else. And one of the fun things about being in the position I have as hosting this show is I get to constantly evaluate and check in on where those things are at and how it affects Oregon. So the playoff implications for this game against Penn State for Oregon, to me, have been magnified with how this college football season has began. Through the first few weeks of the year, USC and Indiana both have looked real good. Now, I thought USC would be a good team. Oregon plays them at home on November 22nd. As I discussed on the Mailbag show yesterday, there's a real shot if those teams live up to their potential and both have one loss or less, that you could see College Game Day in Eugene, which would be awesome. It'd be awesome. Game Day tries to avoid going to the same location twice, but featuring the same team twice, well, that just is how the cookie crumbles sometimes. So that would be really fun. Be quite the feeling as Big Ten foes for the first time squaring off in Eugene. That'd be something. But if you didn't see what Indiana did to Illinois last week, a year ago, Oregon played a really good game against Illinois, as in the Ducks played very well. And last year was a good Illinois team. This year's Illinois team looks very similar to last season. They have a lot of the same players. They lost a couple of receivers, but overall, Illinois is a good team. I'm not super down on Illinois, even though Indiana absolutely smoked them 63-10. But last year, Oregon played Illinois at home, dominated them, and won 38-9. Indiana just beat them 63-10. Oregon plays Indiana at home, and we know how tough the Ducks are to beat at Autzen Stadium. But Indiana looks even better than I thought. I thought they'd be a good team. Over on Locked On College Football, predicted them to go 9-3 this year. I didn't think they had that in them. I actually picked Illinois to win the game. Not my best selection. Me and everybody else that picked Illinois, not the best pick you could have had. Then you factor in that USC looks good to begin the year. Thought they might. And keep an eye on what happens up in Seattle this weekend. Washington is looking for a marquee moment and a big win. They are yet to lose, I believe, a Big Ten conference game at home. Ohio State is coming to town. Now, Washington's not ranked at the moment. I actually don't think that's correct. I think they should be in the top 25 because they're pretty good, but they don't have a big win yet. Their non-conference schedule is really easy. Washington State was their toughest opponent, and they were a 20-point favorite on the road. So, yeah, I understand why they aren't. I'm just saying that could be a pretty darn good team, and you have to play them on the road. So bringing this back to Penn State, when you look at those three games, I said coming into this year, the floor for Oregon, as in everything goes wrong, barring, a mass slew of injuries, the floor was 8-4. That still feels like it is absolutely on the table. Now, do I anticipate Oregon going there? No. But I got this question after Oregon's first couple of games when they looked incredibly impressive. Do I think the floor has shifted? And I thought, well, yeah, maybe the worst they could do is 9-3. No, if everything were to go wrong, I mean, like worst case scenario, sure, Oregon could wind up at 8-4. I'd be shocked if they win fewer than 10 games. Absolutely, positively shocked. But when you look at this Penn State matchup and the opportunity that Oregon has to go on the road and beat a top 5 team, what you can now give yourself when talking about Oregon's path to the playoff this year is basically all but a guarantee that the Ducks will get in. Because the 4 games that are in between the Indiana and then the 2 games at the end of the year against the former Pac-12 schools, RIP, at Rutgers, not worried. Really, really not worried. Wisconsin at home, not worried. At Iowa, kind of worried. Well, okay. Kind of worried, frankly, is overstating it. Kind of has my attention. Their offense has been better. I still don't trust Iowa consistently. Minnesota at home, solid program, not at Autzen Stadium. I'd be more worried if Minnesota was on the road, but it's at home. So if Oregon were to go on the road this week and beat Penn State, because of the magnitude of that win, the stage that it's going to have, the quality of team that Penn State is, and what they should be able to do the rest of the season, win or lose, they'll be 10-2 and in the playoff, I think, at worst, which is basically what they were. They were 11-2 last year after Oregon beat them in the Big Ten championship game. You're talking about an ability to go the rest of the season and lose 2 of those big games, 2 of 3 of which are at home. So every time I think about this Penn State game, there's another angle, another factor, another way that the size of it just continues to grow. Because if Oregon goes on the road and loses this game, the pressure for those particular matchups is ratcheted up significantly. Now, I think 10-2 because of Oregon's preseason ranking, and so long as they don't get blown out by Penn State, I think at 10-2, Oregon is safely into the college football playoff because that means you will have beaten one of Indiana, who's currently a top 12 team, USC, who's going to be a top 25 team, or Washington. You would have beaten at least one of them. And if it's Washington, then it's on the road and 2 home losses. I don't see those things all going wrong for the Ducks. I think it's worst case scenario, as I mentioned. But if Oregon goes out and beats Penn State, the path to missing the playoff is darn near impossible to see. If they lose to Penn State, well, it looks tougher. The road ahead looks significantly tougher than it did when this season began. Because I thought Indiana was pretty good. Can you imagine how we'd be feeling right now if Oregon had just taken a top 10 team in Illinois, which is where they were ranked, justifiably so, and beaten them 63-10? I've seen Fernando Mendoza at Autzen Stadium before. It wasn't with that Indiana team. And Indiana in particular is the one whose stock I think is elevated the most. USC is kind of what I expected. Frankly, they do look good. Washington so far looks good. We'll see what happens against Ohio State this weekend. They'll get a real test up there in Seattle at Husky Stadium. But Indiana winning that game makes my perception of Oregon's schedule shift into, wow, you got some real highlight opportunities here, some circle the game moments, because this game is not going to, that Indiana is not just a quarterback and a passing offense. They looked like a complete team across the board with a really good coaching staff. And I know it's at Autzen Stadium, but that was one of the most impressive performances, probably the most impressive performance of the weekend. It's one of the more impressive outcomes I've seen early in this college football season. I'm talking on the same level as Florida State controlling the game against Alabama. Frankly, that's probably number 1, and this one might be number 2. So when you look at this Penn State matchup, however big you think the stakes are, however many different implications you think there are, everything that Oregon has to gain, I think, is about the same. I think with how their schedule looks right now, there's a little bit more to lose with a loss. So if you think you're overhyping this game and its importance in your head, you're not. You are. It's not just Oregon's first big measuring stick. The playoff implications are very, very serious this weekend. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. My favorite segment to do during the season, I shout out guys that don't necessarily pop in your mind of, oh, they played well. But after reviewing the film, yeah, these guys need to have their names recognized a bit. First, this episode brought to you by Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. We've all seen it around. I've used it I don't know how many times. There are certain businesses that really make a neighborhood feel like home, whether it's the local sports bar packed on game days or the coffee shop that knows your order or the corner deli that's been serving your community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. And the transactions that Square allows you to make are just so incredibly simple. It takes less than 3 seconds to make a payment when you use Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy that you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. And I hope to see you on TV at the Whiteout. If you want to go to the game, Game Time's the place to go. College football's back. I'm pretty excited about it. Tailgates, rivalries, energy, it's all here. It's already a third of the way done, which is kind of sad. It's kind of sad. So if you want to take advantage of the opportunity to go to games, you should check out Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. You don't want to go through the battle of endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. You want to check out Game Time. That's the way to go. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Second segment sips are important. It is also important to shout out those individuals that might not pop off the film all the time or might have faded to the background. I can only do this segment so many times per year. There's so much to get to. I don't have time for Tuesday trivia this week. Just so many things to discuss with this Penn State game. So, going to table that. It will return. It will return, I promise. But I'm going to start with Alex Harkey, who didn't always have a perfect game on Saturday. He got beat to allow the first sack of the year, but this is as much about the individual game as the season he's had. Alex Harkey has outplayed Isaiah World from what I've seen. PFF agrees. World hasn't been bad, but I don't think he has reached his full potential yet at left tackle. But it's the energy that Alex Harkey brings. And Dan Lanning got asked about it in his post-game press conference and was talking about how Harkey brings that kind of I'd want to go down an alley with you sort of mentality. Like he's just a dog. He's just one of those dudes that just is bullying people out there all the time. He had a lot of really good blocks and great sequences. Again, it was probably his worst game of the year, but I shout him out because his worst game still sees Oregon win, or he was helping Oregon win PFFs. I don't know why I can't talk. I don't know. Probably just done too much content today. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to try this again. Here we go. Alex Harkey was still a part of Oregon's offensive line that was PFF's offensive line of the week in all of college football. 1 sack allowed, only 2 total pressures, and the Ducks ran for 280 yards. Did not matter who was carrying the ball. Harkey's been that guy, and Poncho's what I expected. Emmanuel Prenon's been doing really well, but I just love the energy. You need those sorts of dudes. A Johnny Cornelius was an awesome player at right tackle. I don't feel like he had the same mindset that Harkey does that makes him stand out in my head like this. And it's just a fun thing to watch. And by the way, there's no shot at a Johnny Cornelius. Dude was a bona fide stud. And hope he has a long NFL career. I think he will. So, Alex Harkey's one guy. Another one flying under the radar. And this is a guy who you as in many of you fans out there, and I had a prolonged discussion about in the offseason of sorts. Jamari Johnson. Jamari Johnson has surpassed my expectations because he looks fully healthy. Coming off an injury from last year at Louisville, you see why this guy was a blue chip tight end recruit. He looks big, fast, he's making great blocks, and he also has come up with some pretty key receptions. And this has been part of Oregon's offense for the last couple of years with Will Stein. They have been a big tight end screen team, and they threw one to Jamari Johnson on Saturday. And Jamari also had a third down reception to keep a drive alive, and it was not a particularly easy play. So I was definitely on the lower expectation end for what Oregon has behind Kenyon Sadiq. Through the first 4 games, I feel better about that now than I did in the offseason. I think Jamari Johnson has looked really good. And obviously you want to see Sadiq on the field as much as you can because there's still nobody like him. Like, even Jamari Johnson can't run like Kenyon Sadiq can. You know, the stutter route on 4 verts against Northwestern for the touchdown, not last week, but the week before. Like, nobody can do that on Oregon's roster except Kenyon Sadiq. But Johnson keeps showing up in a couple of key spots, and I think he's blocking well. He's a real physical presence. He looks fast. He looks big, and he's doing some good things. It's not a huge role on offense, but that's why he's a part of this segment. You know, I don't come on here and say, well, Dante Moore is one of the top standouts. Well, duh. Of course. He went for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. And DeCorey and Moore, yeah, that's the obvious one. But how about Gary Bryant? Stepping up with no Justice Lowe, and Jeremiah McLaughlin deserves a mention in this segment as well, catching his first touchdown last year. McClellan's also a great blocker on the perimeter. We know DeCorian is. That's been a big thing for Oregon this year. I didn't think they were actually as sharp as they have been in prior games blocking on the outside. I mean, Sadiq in particular, you know, if he picks up a block on Dante Moore's long scramble, like he just whiffed the guy in space, it's a tough block to make. But if he makes it, Dante Moore might run for what wound up being a 64-yard touchdown. It was still how long was his run? It's still a 28-yard carry, but there was more to be had, and Sadiq just missed. But anyway, Gary Bryant, Jeremiah McLaughlin are I think, just proof once again that the depth of this Oregon receiver room is crazy awesome. Remember, we have not Evan Stewart. Maybe he plays this year, maybe he doesn't. But Evan Stewart is a stud. You lost Jerion Dickey before the year. And does anybody have any qualms about the receiver room? No. And Gary Bryant just being a steady veteran presence out there. He caught a long touchdown against the Beavs on a nice throw from Dante Moore and a cool play design by Will Stein. You know, they faked the swing screen and pulled the offensive lineman around to try to sell the run, and then he runs right down the field, makes the play. Like, he's just really reliable, and it was a 49-yard touchdown, and I appreciate what Gary Bryant is. Now, he did not have his best day fielding punts. He had one good return, but he had a couple others that he wasn't able to catch, and those are the sorts of things that definitely need to get cleaned up when you're playing Penn State because the margins are going to be really thin. But as a wide receiver, yeah, Gary Bryant is just he's so solid. He's so solid, and it's a really nice piece for Dante Moore to have on the perimeter. Last couple of guys, and curious to hear you think, drop them in the comments below. Aiden Breland, Amari Washington, Mateo Uyunglele. Upon rewatching the game, one in which Oregon State had 167 total yards, 147 total yards of offense, which is a staggeringly low number, regardless of how Oregon State has been this year and what Oregon expects to be. That's an insanely low number. 67 rushing yards allowed. Yeah, after the one drive, Oregon made some adjustments in there. Aiden Breland had a couple of quarterback pressure moments. Amari Washington didn't have the big impact that we saw maybe against Montana State and Oklahoma State earlier this year. And neither did Mateo, because there were a lot of run plays in this game, a lot of quick hitters, which is the right game plan from Oregon State. Of course, it didn't matter because the secondary is so good. I forgot to include one name on here. I'll get to in a moment. But those guys, when I went back and watched the game again, they were winning their blocks, and they were just winning a lot. And they were very disruptive. They were all, Amari in particular. I'm chair of the Amari Washington fan club, so of course I was watching for it. But Amari Washington was really good. Breland did some nice things, and Mateo, his dad, tweeted out his highlights from the game, and made the same point that I had observed as well, and just mentioned that they were running and doing quick passing. Like, yeah, you're not going to generate sacks there, but Mateo had, I think there was a stretch where he beat a tackle. Somebody tweeted it at me, and I had seen it as well, that he'd beaten the tackle 3 times in a row. He was just very disruptive out there. So too were Amari Washington, Aiden Breland. Even though it didn't really show up in the box score, I don't think that Oregon didn't record a sack in this game. Only 2 TFLs, Tatum Tuioti and Tioni Gray combined for those two. But yeah, I think that what they did in the trenches was really good. And then I want to close with Brandon Finney. This guy is a true freshman, and man, he looks really good. Trent Walker, Oregon State's go-to receiver, had just 3 targets in this game. Anytime, it didn't matter which receiver was going up against Finney. Ify Obadegwu's been solid this year as well. Finney has been Oregon's best corner. I think he is Oregon's best corner right now. And that's an incredible thing to say about a true freshman 4 games into the season. But right now, Penn State's top receiver, probably Kyron Hudson. It depends on the day. If you tell me, all right, I know Penn State's going to throw in a big spot to Kyron Hudson, who do you want guarding him? I'm going with Brandon Finney. I'm 100% on the Brandon Finney hype train here. I think this guy is going to be an absolute stud at defensive back. And the secondary in the coming years going to continue to be really, really good. But those are my individual standouts from the week. Love getting to do that segment. Let's pivot back to Penn State. Dante Moore, Dierre Hill, and Devon Jackson. Thoughts on those 3 guys going into this matchup? First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes are sweating all the details. Mazda brings that same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel anything but. Level up from smooth handling to intuitive controls and all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV. You can drive through confidence with almost any season. Like Oregon's players, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. This is such an awesome opportunity for Oregon, for Dan Lanning, for a number of different young players like Brandon Finney, who I was talking about, or Mateo, who I think has faced some questions here and there about whether, he's a high-end NFL guy. But regardless, you can apply this conversation really to a number of guys in this spot, because it's such a grand stage in college football. But I don't think there's any player that has a bigger opportunity to elevate his own personal stock this year and in his entire career than Dante Moore. You go out against 4 inferior opponents and look the way Dante Moore has, yeah, you'll turn some heads. You turn every head if you go on the road to Penn State, who's off of a bye, and with Jim Knowles as their defensive coordinator, you go out and absolutely tear it up. If Dante Moore goes out and doesn't do anything beyond what we've seen him do so far, it'll be an incredible testament to what he and the coaching staff have done for his development over the last now season and a half. Because if he looks the way he has in the first few games against Penn State, that will be proof positive that he can do anything. He's got enough mobility, arm talent, and he just keeps showcasing all of these great traits and all of this great growth from what he was as a true freshman. It's awesome to watch. His decision-making when he decides to run, yes, I would love to see him learn how to slide consistently, but he really has only taken one kind of funky hit. I think it was against Oklahoma State when the guy, rolled on top of him a bit, but he was okay. He hasn't taken major hits. He knows to get out of bounds. He goes down. It's not always super pretty like Mariota was, but it's not the, focal point of his game. So he can run when he needs to. He's mobile. The arm talent, ball placement, accuracy. I mentioned on my reaction show, the deep ball has to be better because he missed 2 open guys. And if you get that shot against Penn State, you can't miss it in this spot. But, last year against the Nittany Lions, Dylan Gabriel was 22 of 23. Is that right? Wait, hold on. I might have written that down wrong. 22 of 32. Yeah, I definitely crossed those numbers up. I read it and said, wait, he was 22 of 23? That's not right. No. 22 of 32, 283 yards and 4 touchdowns. Oregon in the game ran for 283 yards. Sorry, 186 yards, 283 passing. if Oregon puts up those same sorts of numbers in this game on the road, the hype train for Oregon on this podcast is going to be full steam ahead, regardless of whether or not Oregon even wins the game. But, as I talked about with Seiko on yesterday's show, the amount we know about these two teams is frankly, it's not nothing. It's definitely not nothing. It's just not a major something yet. The best team that Oregon and Penn State combined have played is probably Northwestern. Northwestern is favored this week against UCLA. I bet they win that game. The Bruins are terrible. They've got an interim head coach. But, Northwestern, for all their shortcomings, I thought looked like they were fast and physical defensively. And Montana State, still, it's, FCS program. Speaking of FCS programs, Oklahoma State also might kind of be an FCS program at the moment. Like, it is not looking good over there in Stillwater. But for Dante Moore in this game, if he goes out and has that type of stat line in his first full year starting, Dylan Gabriel was setting a record for the most starts in the history of college football. Man, sky will be the limit. And the conversations about whether Dante Moore will be a first-round quarterback in next year's NFL draft, they will take off. His Heisman campaign for 2025 will absolutely take off if he has that sort of stat line and Oregon wins the game. So, he could do a lot. Oregon has to win for Dante Moore's Heisman stock to soar. For his NFL draft stock to soar, he just has to play well. If he goes out, like Mariota in the championship game against Ohio State, he plays well, Oregon loses, the NFL will still look at it and go, oh, that's the guy we want to have come be our franchise quarterback, because I don't know what the guy can't do right now. So massive opportunity for Dante Moore this week to confirm to all the Oregon fans out there that, what you've been seeing is not just a result of who the caliber of Ducks who Oregon's been playing, and that you've got a guy that can just be so incredibly special. And we know the potential's there, but Saturday is the day to realize that full potential. So another couple guys to talk about. I'll end on a more positive note, and I'll bring up Devon Jackson here. We know how important the run game is going to be against Penn State. They gashed Oregon for 290 yards last year running the ball in the Big Ten title game. So 297 to be exact. And, Bryce Betcher's played well this year. Jerry Mixon's been really good. I mentioned Devon Jackson last on this show talking about how he's been struggling from what I have seen. PFF agrees. Both of those things still say the same thing. On one of Oregon State's, and I know we're nitpicking here, Oregon State had two runs that were 10 yards or more, and one of them, I think they ended up saying it was a 10-yard run. I don't know. Oregon State didn't have a lot of success on the ground. On one of the plays where they did, it really shouldn't have been. They ran counter, Oregon State did. Bryce Betcher and Devon Jackson came downhill to, be in position for their run fill. Right? They're right there in the hole, and Devon Jackson didn't make the play. He needs to have his best game of the year going into this Penn State matchup. He really does. Because I think Andy Kotelnicki will watch last year's film, same defensive coordinator, Tosh Lupoy, and I'll talk more about the coaches with Seiko for our next crossover tomorrow. But the fundamental philosophy, if I'm Andy Kotelnicki, Penn State's offensive coordinator, I'm saying, how can we just do exactly what we did last year? That's Jim Knowles has got to figure it out. Gave up 45 points. I put up 37 on this Oregon defense last year, and they were more veteran. They were more experienced. And when you want to run the ball, you got to win up front, and then you have to try and confuse the linebackers with your scheme or get them blocked. And Devon Jackson so far this year has probably been one of the more disappointing players because he has such an important role to play. I don't think he's played his best football. Saturday would be a phenomenal time for him to play his best ball. Would love to see it. His potential is immense. I don't think he's realized that yet. If he does, Oregon's defense can level up. I really, really think that. So, on a more positive note to end the show, I've gotten this question before, and I just keep thinking about it every single week. Should we see more Dierre Hill? I mean, it's hard to argue with the results from Jayden Limar. He's, as I talked about him originally, way back when he first started getting carries for Oregon, he's a bigger Travis Dye. It doesn't always look explosive or dynamic, and I don't think he's an NFL guy, but he's productive, and it's hard to argue with the result. He had a juke move on one of his carries of a defensive tackle that was pretty disgusting, frankly, and it doesn't look like he'd be the most athletic guy or the fastest, but jumps over a dude, makes plays, over 5 yards a carry last week. Every time I watch Dierre Hill, though, I heard Eric Scopel make this point, pretty sure Scopel over on Odds and Audibles, and he said, when Dierre Hill carries the ball, you can hear Autzen Stadium collectively hold its breath, like, is he gonna make a big play? Because that's been the expectation so far. I feel the same way. I feel the exact same way. And I hope Noah Whittington's back this week. You want to have everybody available that you can. But man, I keep watching Dierre Hill carry the ball, and the way that he moves, the way that he runs, he's good between the tackles. He is already a high-level back on the outside, and we know the home run speed he has. The fun part about Dierre Hill? He has to be a college football player for at least 2 seasons after this one. He's played 4 games and already looks like this. And so far, Mekhi Hughes had a good game, by the way. For those of you who thought, well, Mekhi Hughes just isn't any good. No, I think the coaches were being honest when they said, yeah, we like Mekhi Hughes. We just didn't realize the true freshmen were going to be this good. Well, nobody's taken Jordan Davison's role away in the goal line situation. And Jordan Davison's also good in pass protection, from what I have seen. And Dierre Hill's a guy that, can line up in the slot, can come on the fly sweeps. I just wonder if he shouldn't get more straight up carries. Like, he looks, I'm trying to think, kind of like Thomas Tyner-ish, but a little bit more speed driven, like Tony Brooks James style. I don't know. He's a good player. He's really good, and I like the way he runs. If I were Rashad Samples, Oregon's running backs coach, I'd say that RB1, Noah Whittington, that's clear. I'd probably have Dierre Hill RB2, Limar third, and at that point, like I can go in any direction. Jay Harris, Mekhi Hughes, maybe Dink Riggs in there as well. But yeah, I keep watching Dierre Hill thinking, he didn't get the ball on the perimeter. They used him as a decoy this week on that fly sweep action. I bet that comes back against Penn State. I bet we see that at least twice, because he's a guy that can just make that game-changing play, and you got to give him that opportunity. So I think they'll keep being balanced with the running back rotation going forward, but the more I watch Dierre Hill and the way he runs, the vision he already has as a true freshman, the cuts he makes, I just continue to be really, really impressed. So there's so much more to talk about. I'm going to do another mailbag-only pod later this week, so send me all your questions, preferably via Twitter DMs at @SMcLaughlinCFB or at Locked On Ducks. That'd be the easiest way, unless you want to be a Locked On Ducks insider. You get priority access, a bunch of other perks as well. That link in the description below for a free 14-day trial. So that's all for today. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.